Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I want to have a little chat about why libraries are awesome. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. So libraries, we're talking about lending libraries here, like district, local, town lending libraries, rather than personal libraries. Because I've recently got back into using my local library, and have, my love for libraries has been rekindled somewhat. I went in last week to my local library in Glossop, which is my nearest town, and for the first time in a long time, just spent like well over an hour just browsing the shelves and finding lots of stuff to put on my list for later, or stuff to get out just as kind of a mood read, things like that, and just listening to people watching basically, and earwigging on sort of conversation with the staff were sort of having about books and with other people, and just thinking how lovely it is in terms of the community and how welcoming they were and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to have a little chat today about libraries and how great they are. So we'll start off with just a little potted history, my potted history with libraries. I don't remember going to the public library very often as a kid, but I do remember my school library very well, my secondary school library, because it had an excellent librarian who was very passionate and encouraging about reading. And I was quite a loner in secondary school, and quite a geek, quite a nerd, and didn't really like being around my fellow students, to be honest. So I'd go to the library because it was kind of a refuge. It was a safe space. And I used to go in there and I used to read, or I used to help shelve books, things like that, just to be in there. It was a warm, welcoming space, and I don't think I'm probably the only one who, as a kid, found refuge in books and in libraries. As a teenager, and sort of certainly when I was in my early undergrad years, I used the big public library in Grimsby Central Library, which is the closest town to where I lived when I grew up. And that was a fantastic library. That was like several massive floors just full of books. And certainly when I was home from university for the holidays, I would go down there and grab myself some summer reading, because I'd spent all of my pennies on books for my university studies, as well as beer. When I came home, I'd just go and get a load of stuff to see me through the summer, and that's how I ended up reading The Exorcist, which became one of my all-time favourites. A fantastic reading experience, which I probably never would have picked up had I not just seen it sitting there on the library shelves. They also had like a massive bank of computers, all connected up to the internet, and certainly back in the 90s, when the internet was newfangled, that was one of the places I could go and try stuff out on the internet, on the really slow dial-up modems. But it was great, that there's more than just books in a library. There's access to other things. When I was a postgrad student, I didn't use the lending library in Hull where I did my degrees very much, but I worked in the academic library. And although academic libraries are a very different beast to a public lending library, I love them all the same. And working in one was brilliant. It was fascinating, really, to see how the library worked and the amount of work that goes into running a library. And as I say, academic libraries are different, but the general principles are the same in terms of the administrative systems, of checking out, checking in, memberships, things like acquisitions, things like, you know, book repair, all that kind of stuff, stock, shelving, classifications, you know, kind of things like, you know, Dewey Decimal System versus Library of Congress, which is what we had at Hull, Library of Congress system. You know, that was all fascinating, and crossing over into archives as well and research, things like that. We had loads of stuff on microfiche and stuff like that, periodicals, all that kind of stuff. I loved that. That was really, really interesting to be a part of. So although I didn't use the lending libraries, I spent a lot of time in a library. When I moved over to Manchester after my postgrad, I started using Manchester Central Library, which is an incredible building because it's a gorgeous building to start with, and it's been done up within relatively recent years. And they have an absolute massive stock of books, as you'd expect for a big city library, basically. But they also had, right from the beginning, I mean, they used to be the Library Theatre Company, which had a theatre in the basement of the library. They've moved out since into a brand new building. But, you know, there was theatre there, there was art exhibitions in the library, there were community groups in the library, there were various different events on. They'd have, you know, spaces for authors and public speakers to do with literature to come in. It was a hub, a community space, you know, and that's one of the other reasons why I love a library, as well as just the access to the books that are in there. And I don't use Manchester anymore, even though I still have membership, because it's just further to go for me, and I don't go to Manchester as often now that I live out in the sticks, in the countryside. So I go to Glossop Library instead, which is just 10 minutes down the train tracks, and I go to Glossop regularly. And I just started using the local library quite recently, and it's small. It's a new building, but it's very small, but it's very well stocked. And that's not necessarily in terms of the number of books, although they do have a lot for the, you know, for the space that they've got to fill. It's the variety. They make sure there is something for everyone. So when I went in there the other day, I went in to look for books for July's Adventures in Genre, which is horror books, but for middle grade and YA readers. And I didn't necessarily want to have to spend money on stuff. I don't have any of that kind of thing in stock. I didn't want to spend money on books, particularly to buy for this particularly. And so I thought, I'll go and see what the library's got. And their children's section, sort of YA section, is incredible. They've got loads and loads of stuff. And one of the things that I really appreciated was, because it's June at the moment, it's Pride Month, they had a whole shelf and display dedicated to LGBTQIA plus YA and sort of middle grade books and authors, both non-fiction and fiction. And it's so lovely to see that in a small town local library. And bear in mind, like, Glossop is, it's not, you know, it's not one of the most conservative towns, but it's a small town, it's a small traditional town, and you don't always expect to see that kind of thing in you know, that sort of town. And it was lovely to see that. It made me feel very welcome in the space. And, you know, I really appreciated that they'd done that they'd gone to the effort to make a thing of this section, this display. As I say, they've got an amazing children's library. I've been in there when it's been school holidays, and it's always full of kids with, you know, parents and the library staff all chatting, you know, passionately and animatedly about, you know, what books the kids love, and giving them other stuff that they, you know, they might like. And they're really knowledgeable, the staff, about, you know, kind of what's suitable for different ages and all that kind of stuff. So the kids section alone is worth raving about. But it wasn't until really the other day when I was in that I really took note of the fiction section, to start with, and they've got a ton of stuff. So it would be great for me for adventures in genre for the rest of the year to be able to go in and not, because I've kind of been buying bits and pieces cheap, second hand, or buying, you know, Kindle books, whereas actually I'll be able to get a lot of stuff in the library. But also this time when I went in, I discovered there's a whole other floor which I didn't know existed. A whole other floor of books. And upstairs is stuff like the poetry section, and a massive crime thriller section, fiction, and local history and biography and social studies, computer science, absolute ton of stuff, and some really nice space to sit and read or work or what have you up there. And it's just one of those places which you think, yeah, this is what we need in the community. And as I say, they also, you know, sort of have computers, and they do computer courses, and they'll help people out, all that kind of stuff. So in terms of how I use the library, as opposed to like buying books of subscription, I like to use my library as a browsing place to browse, basically. I don't necessarily go in there looking for a specific book. If I want a specific book, I'll look on the catalogue beforehand, but I tend not to do that. I tend to go in and just want to browse it, because I think that's when you find some of the gems that you didn't even know existed. It's just a really nice experience to go in and browse. And I probably will go in there at some point, you know, and read as well. It's like, certainly if I've got some time to kill when I'm in Glossop while I'm waiting for a train home or something, library's right near the train station, I'll go in there and I'll sit down quietly and have a read. It's just a nice space to be in. So, pros of the library, pros of any library. Doesn't cost you anything, unless you get fines. You know, I definitely spend more on books now doing BookTube than I ever have done before, just on a general like month-to-month basis. Even if it's only a few pence here and there for like ebooks on sale, or a couple of quid here or there for second-hand books, I still spend more money on books than I did before. So having access to a whole wealth of books that I don't have to pay anything for, is a massive pro. For me as well, I think the pro of a library book is that it kind of, if I want to read it, if I pick it up and I take it out, I need to read it. It's kind of the impetus is there for me to actually read the damn thing straight away, because it's got to go back in 3 weeks. There's, you know, so many books which I buy, which I really like the look of, but then they sit on the shelves because there isn't the time pressure, or, you know, not pressure in a bad way, but just there isn't the impetus to get it read. Whereas the library makes a point of that, unless I want to pay the fines, which I don't. A pro, I think, with a modern library, or libraries generally these days, certainly I can speak for the UK, don't know what it's like elsewhere, is access to ebooks and audiobooks as part of your membership as well. I think most libraries have some sort of partnership with a service that allows for the lending of ebooks and audiobooks. So again, it opens up your the whole, you know, kind of realm of possibilities even further. I think another one as well is that my library again has a huge selection of large print books and books on tape still, and books on CD. So, you know, for those users who still need access to sort of slightly more what we'd probably think of as old school formats nowadays, certainly in terms of the books on CD, when you think you've got audiobooks, you know, digital audiobooks, and Audible and things like that. You know, it's really important to make sure that access is there for people who can't or don't want to use, you know, the services like Audible, streaming services, downloads, things like that. Folks who still want to just be able to like get a book, pop the CD into their CD player, or pop the tape into their tape player and listen to a book. You know, libraries I think are still used a lot by older members of the community, and it's really important that remains. I think another pro as well of the library is going in and chatting to the staff. You know, if you go into a bookshop, I don't automatically, it depends on the bookshop, but certainly like a big bookshop, I wouldn't necessarily just end up chatting with one of the staff members about books, generally speaking. Whereas in a library, you often get chatting, I think. Certainly I do, anyway. As I say, there's a sense of community, there's a sense of connection there. And I really like that. It feels a lot more, it feels a very welcoming place. So, are there any cons? We've done the pros of the library, but are there any cons of the library? I don't think there are many, to be honest. I think the only one for me, personally, is relating to their ebook and audiobook collections, which there are loads of stuff on those services, but they are it's so difficult often to actually get hold of the stuff, you know, because there's still the same process of having to reserve something and wait for it to become available. And like, for instance, I was looking the other day at a couple of books that are new out that have been really popular. So Yellowface by Rebecca Kwan was one of them. And both the audiobook and the ebook were like, they were checked out or they were reserved. Like, I think the ebook was reserved until like the end of December, and the audiobook was reserved right through until like March 2026. So I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not waiting that long for that. I don't know what it's like to try and reserve the physical book. I didn't check that, because obviously you can reserve physical books for the library as well and get stuff sent from other branches of this sort of the same county. So Glossop is in Derbyshire, and there's loads of different Derbyshire libraries, and so I can get stuff sent from one of the other libraries. But yeah, I didn't check what the wait time's like for the physical copy, but I imagine it's probably similar. But the same goes for, you know, for that in terms of a con. You know, there might be something that you really want to read, but unless you get in there super quick, you might be waiting for, in that case, over a year to get to read it. So I think that's, you know, one of the cons of it. As I say, I tend to go in and browse and pick stuff up that is there at the time. I'm not particularly interested in trying to get hold of something that I know is popular, because there's too much of a wait, and often by the time I get to it, if it's a long wait, I'll have moved on to other things. So if there's something new that I desperately want to read, I'll probably end up buying it. But it's a personal thing. If you don't mind waiting for something, then it's a great way to get something without having to spend the cash yourself. So yeah, I don't think there are that many other cons for me to a library. I think they are absolutely awesome places. They are always here. One of the first things that gets threatened in budget cuts, and there was a lot of library closures a few years back. And now there is a real kind of, anytime anybody mentions possibly closing libraries, there's a bit of an uproar. You know, it is difficult, I think, for libraries to stay open. They do need a lot of support, and the way to support them is to use them. It is very much a use it or lose it type thing, I think. You know, we've got to support them by using them, and by, you know, singing their praises where we can. So yes, support your local library, folks. It's a good thing to do, and it saves you some pennies if you're like me and you have the constant urge to splurge on books. So I will leave that ramble there. Do let me know in the comments if you use your local library, what you love about libraries, and yeah, I'd be very interested to hear other folks rave about their libraries as well, and libraries in general. So yes, I will leave it there for today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like, and subscribing for more content coming very soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.